Hello, and welcome to Kevin's Corner TV. My name is Kevin Corby, and I'm the editor of the Gold Coast Gazette, a weekly newspaper established in 1991 along with my mother. The newspaper covers the North Shore of Long Island, and over the years I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people. Through this show, I hope to introduce you to some of those people. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, we're down here at Page One Restaurant in Glen Cove, and I'm speaking with Richard Tortorici, who is a local author. Richard, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kevin. My pleasure.
Now, tell me about your books. We have two of them here.
Well, we have my latest book, Blood Bond. It's out only a couple of months. Is a sequel to the first book, Blood Relative, and basically it's a book about Frank Barron, who is a New York City homicide detective and also a night walker. And as Frank Barron would say, a night walker is something like a vampire, except we're the good kind. And while he lives on human blood, he lives on the human blood of the rapist, the murderer, the all-time scum of the earth people, and he's kind of a vigilante. And the two books chronicle his adventures as a New York City homicide detective, where he actually solves crimes, and he gets himself into trouble being a night walker.
Cool, very cool. Now, how did you come up with this character?
You know, when I was a kid, and as all kids do, they like superheroes. And I had friends who were into Batman and Superman. Some of the girls were into Wonder Woman. Dracula was always my hero. Mm-hmm. I mean, Dracula was so cool. I mean, he could change into smoke or into a wolf. He could fly, and I grew up like that. And of course, I didn't want to make my protagonist, my hero, into a bad guy. So I came up with the idea of Frank Barron, and he's a good vampire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. And what does he do exactly in the novels?
Well, in Blood Bond, which is a sequel to Blood Relative, the story is about Homeland Security finding out the existence of night walkers and deciding that a band of night walkers would make a great army in the war against terror. And they get a hold of some night walker blood, and they create their own night walker. Mm. And as what happens with a lot of government projects, everything goes awry, and this new night walker is kind of loses his mind and thinks he's the son of God. And that's the basis for the story. And Frank now has to, while protecting the secret of night walkers, has to stop this new government night walker from creating terror of his own.
Now tell me about your writing process. Are you writing every day, or are you...
Yeah, I try to write every day. I try to spend a few hours every day continuing what I'm working on or editing the day before, the work from the day before. I also try to stay one book ahead. For instance, I'm writing another novel now, which has nothing to do with Nightwalkers, but in my mind, I am planning my next novel. It's something called Off the Grid, which is totally different. It's not a horror novel. It's about a young man who gets in trouble with both organized crime and the government and has to disappear throughout the country, which nowadays is a very difficult thing to do. With,
sure.
Most of us are photographed a bunch of times a day. Mm-hmm. So every day I try to do something. I start out the day in the gym generally, and while I'm on the treadmill, I run the scene that I'm going to write that day in my head. And I actually run it in my head like it's a movie. And I know it's going to be a good writing day if I can actually see the action. And most days are like that. Writing for me was an avocation, and now it's become my vocation, and I'm glad I started.
Now, before this, you were in education, right?
Yeah, I spent 32 years in education as a a teacher and school administrator. I worked 25 years in New York City. I left Goddard Junior High, where I was the acting principal, and became the administrator at Edgemont High School in Scarsdale. And in 1999, state offered a retirement incentive in New York, and I decided to take that because I've always wanted to write. And it's worked out very well.
Oh, so you've been doing that ever since?
I've been writing 1999, when I retired, I decided this is it. I'm going to write. I've always wanted to write. You've always said that this was the thing you wanted to do, and so I signed up for a lot of courses, and the summer went by, and I found a million things to do, not to write. The lawn had to be redone, and the trees had to be cut down, and oh my God, I have to paint the inside of my house. My two daughters would say to me, so Dad, have you been writing? Oh yeah, girls, I write every day. And finally, September came, and the first course that I was going to take was at CW Post, and I remember sitting in the front row, and a retired writer, Marvin Cohen, just a nice guy. We're friends to this day. He looks at me and says, "Oh, okay, read what you wrote." And I looked up at him and I said, "Well, I haven't written anything." And he like stepped back, like I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And he said, "Don't come back here if you're not going to write."
Right.
So I went home, and that day I wrote the first chapter of the first book.
Good, very good.
Of course, I look back now, and while it was a good plot, it was terribly written.
Right,
It's an awful book.
So you're forever honing your skills and taking courses and stuff?
Those of us who write, I think we all agree that we get better with everything we write. And I think if you look at some of the more famous writers, Dean Koontz and Stephen King, the two of them talk about their writing skills and how they look back at their earlier works and they cringe, even though I think some of their earlier works were excellent. But writers feel that we get better with every word that we put down on paper, and I think that's with any profession. Right,
right. So your main thing is to keep a regular schedule at this point, and you found that works best?
I try to do it as if it's my job. Of course, I don't have to dress up. I don't have to put on a tie. I don't even have to shave.
Right,
right. And sometimes people will see me in Starbucks. In fact, often people will see me in Starbucks with my laptop open, working on my next piece.
Oh, good.
And I can stop when I want to stop and take a break. But usually, if I'm going well, I like to put in 4 hours, and 4 hours gives me about 800 to 1,000 usable words.
Excellent, excellent. Wow. So a lot of editing in the process and all that.
I try not to edit the same day that I write something.
Right.
I give it a day to simmer before I start the next day. I'll read over what I wrote the day before, and I'll do some copy editing, and I'll read it out loud, which kind of scares the people next to me.
Oh, well, even at Starbucks you're doing this? Okay.
Yeah, my lips will be moving, and I'll be out loud, and I'll be reading dialogue about, I went for his throat, and a lot of people get up and they move, politely, and so often I'll edit what I did the day before, and then continue on. But as Stephen King said in one of his books, writing is rewriting. When you finish your first draft, you do a second draft, and then a third draft, and then a fourth draft. Right. And you do it until you don't want to look at it anymore.
Now, who is your publisher for these books?
My publisher is Lumina Press. It's a small publisher in Florida. And I've had nibbles from larger publishers, but with the economy the way it is, the economy has been tough. Right. So publishing itself is a very, very tough business.
Right. Now, we were talking about e-editions. Are these on e-edition, or?
Both books are on e-editions. Blood Bond, recently selected as the 2011 Reader's Favorite Award in Horror, is on both the Kindle and the Nook edition on iPad, and all of the all of the e-readers. Blood Relative right now is on Kindle, and we're looking forward to putting that. My publisher's looking forward to putting that on the other e-readers also.
Excellent, excellent. So tell me also, how'd you get interested in this writing?
Well, when I was very young, it was a time before all the electronic devices. Even television was not as rich as it is now, and most of the shows were for adults. And so when we would get together as kids, we would always do a lot of make-believe, and I love that. I would come up with complicated scenarios of well, who's this hero and what happens then? And I would even add in what now we would call subplots.
Subplots, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that the kids would come back, we'd get back the next day, and we'd say, well, what are we going to do? And we'd say, well, let's continue where we left off yesterday. So we wound up doing episodes. And we had a lot of fun. We even started calling each other by character names, and even some of the younger girls would get into it, even though girls don't do let's pretend as much as boys do.
Right.
And when I got older and I went to college and I started to drive, I would, while I was driving, I'd always look around and say, well, what if I stopped for this light and the building collapsed? What would I do? Would I pull over and run in? And I would visualize what I would do if something tremendous happened, some untoward incident. You know, would I be the hero? Would I save the day? And by the time I got home, I had planted a whole short story in my head, which of course I never put on paper at the time. And my mind was always running like that. Even while I was teaching, while I was a school administrator, I used to come up with plots, and I'd sit down at lunchtime and I'd talk about them. And a lot of my friends would say, well, why don't you put it down? And of course, like anything else, you know, there's always something else that gets in the way. And when you've got to put bread on the table, I teach a course in writing to adults in Glen Cove here, and I tell them you have to write because you love to write, because there's very little money to be made in writing, except for the major writers, the Grishams of the world and the Jeffrey Devers and people like that. Most people don't make a lot of money writing fiction, and so you have to do it because you really love it, and that's why I do it.
All right, excellent. Now you also do some short stories besides the novels? Or?
Well, I had gotten into short stories several years ago. A publisher an agent who I had was having trouble selling my stuff, and he said, well, you're unknown. Why don't you get some short stories published so that I can go to a publisher and say, look, he's done this, this, and this. And I'd never written a short story. You know, I've thought about them, but I'd never written them. And really, they're very, very different than a novel. And as difficult as it may seem to write 400 pages, in a lot of ways, it's easier than writing the same story in 10 pages. And so I went to NYU and took a course and began writing some short stories. And all of us who write get used to rejections. And so I would send them out, and there'd be rejection after rejection after rejection, until finally I sent out a short story, my first one that I ever got published, called Writer's Block. And it was actually based on something that had happened at one of the schools that I worked in. Two teachers were having an affair, and they told me about it, and so I adapted it. I fictionalized it and wrote it into a short story. And I remember the mail came in on that particular day, and you know, from a particular magazine, and I'm looking, oh, another rejection, you know. And I opened it up, and we're happy to bring you into the fold of our magazine.
Wow.
You know, we'd like to publish this for September edition, you know, here enclosed, please find a check.
Wow,
a check.
wow.
A check.
Yeah, yeah.
And shortly after that, my other short stories began to sell.
Right.
And that's when I sold a bunch of them, I went back to novel writing. That's actually right after that. Blood Relative, which was the first book that I published.
Right.
That actually started as a short story.
Oh, okay.
And I kept writing and writing and writing. It got longer and longer and longer, and finally I realized it wasn't a short story. And so I added a couple of subplots, and it's worked out very well.
Wow, excellent. Excellent. Okay, Richard, thank you for being on the show.
It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure.
You can pick up Richard's books at Amazon.com. And next up, I'm going to be interviewing Margie Malone, another local author. Okay, I'm here with Margie Malone, and we're talking about books. Margie is an accomplished writer and author, writing children's books and adult novels. Thank you for being on the show. This is great.
Thank you for having me.
Now, your first book was Dolly the Dolphin.
Yes.
Right? Tell me about your research and how this came about.
Okay, it came about in a strange way. We had a magazine that was a travel magazine, and you know how sometimes you let magazines pile up, you don't read them right away? 3 months after the magazine arrived, I looked through it, and there was a chapter about Dolly the Dolphin written by Jacques Cousteau. And so I called the woman who, I want to say, owned the dolphin. Nobody really owns a dolphin who's free swimming, but she used to feed him every day. And this dolphin, Dolly, fell in love with the Asbury family down in Florida. So I contacted her, and she said, oh, when the magazine article came out, I had so many people who wanted to come down and do write about Dolly. And so I'm talking to her, trying to, you know, convince her. And she said, well, actually, it's been a while since anybody contacted me. So she said, okay, come on down.
Oh, nice.
So it was the fact that I hadn't read the article for 3 months that really got me started.
And what year was this?
That was in the late 70s.
Oh, wow.
That was my first book.
Great. And what made you decide to do it on Dolly the Dolphin besides the article and stuff? That was a big leap of faith to go and research a book.
I had always wanted to write a children's book. And so before I went down to Florida, I contacted Dell Publishing. And they said, oh, that's a great idea. So, you know, me being naive with my first book, I went down there, I bought the plane tickets, the motel tickets and everything, interviewed her, came back, did the write-up, and then Dill Publishing said, oh, gee, you know, we decided against it. So then I had to go around and send it to other publishers, but Simon & Schuster picked it up, so there was a happy ending to it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Now this is probably still available on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Now the next one was Cowboys and Computers.
Cowboys and Computers. Now, Cowboys and Computers had a different kind of challenge. I went out to the ranch. This is the second largest ranch in California. And I was lucky enough to have a girlfriend who worked in the office of the ranch. And so she made the arrangements for me to come out. And I was out there once, took a lot of pictures, took a lot of notes. And then I came back a second time with my husband, Tom, and my daughter, because they had a roundup for 1,000 people. Wow. I mean, this ranch is gigantic, bigger than the city of San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I went out there. I took a second round of pictures, a second round of notes, had it all in an attaché case with my tape recorder. And on the way home, I left it in the limousine. And a Long Island limousine service. And so I immediately called up and they said, oh, don't worry, we have it, we have it. And then they kept putting me off. And I finally went out there, and the upshot was they didn't have it, or they didn't want to get, somebody stole it.
Right.
And so it was, they stole it, I guess, for a tape recorder, but I lost my pictures, my notes. I had to then sit down and write the book immediately from memory. And I had to hire a photographer out in California then to take a set of pictures the same as what I had lost out there.
Right, right.
So,
wow, the pitfalls of authors, huh?
Yes, right. Right, it's not only just trying to get published, it's what happens afterwards.
Exactly. And then this one is Jazz in the World.
Jazz, the biography of Wynton Marsalis. That had its own challenges too. I had heard Wynton Marsalis play, and I thought he was world class. I mean, he is fabulous. And so I found out that his road manager was the person that you had to get in touch with to see him. And so the road manager said, well, send me your books. I want to see them. Or what do you plan to ask Wynton? And blah, blah, blah. I mean, he just gave me the runaround. Oh, Wynton is not in town now. So I got disgusted. And my husband Tom and I bought tickets to hear him play at Lincoln Center. And during intermission, I went looking for him. And they said, well, he's backstage. I said, where's backstage? They said, well, you go out the front door, you go around, you go down this flight of steps, which I did. I got down there, and there's a guy sitting at a desk, you know, very official. And I can see there's a door to the right, and there's a window in the door, and I can see that there's a group back there, and I know that that's where Wynton is. So I had to explain to the guy that I was writing a children's book about him, and I really wanted to see him. So he phones back to the back, and I'm, you know, waiting. Oh my God, what's he going to say? And he said yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So I went back.
So it was actually in the works before you even met him.
Yes, I had done a lot of research, but I felt it wasn't complete without meeting him and talking to him.
Right.
So, and he was charming.
Really?
He was just great.
And I'm sure he was very proud to have the book done about him once he finally found out about it. Right?
He bought 20 copies.
Did he? All right, cool. Very cool. Now, you also have done adult books as well, right?
Oh, yes. I did a romance novel. I used the research based on the ranch in California, and I wrote a story like that. And it wasn't a romance initially, but the editor kept saying, make the heroine more passionate. Make the heroine. So,
well, those were the ones that were selling that
that's
for a
right.
long time, right?
That's right. So that's how the romance book came out. And I had named it The Land Barons. And she called me one day and she said, I have good news and bad. She said, the good news is the cover looks beautiful. She said, the bad news is we changed the title. So she said, it's no longer The Land Barons, it's Love's Sweet Surrender.
And now it's what sells, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Now, the latest book is A Sweater for Duncan, right?
yes.
Okay, tell me about this one.
Well, the challenge for A Sweater for Duncan was that was about 7 or 8 years in the works, strangely enough. I have a friend who wanted to start an online children's book business. And so she asked me to write a story. I wrote a story about Duncan the penguin, And then her business never materialized. So I put the story aside, didn't look at it for probably 5 years or more. And I dug it out and I said, hey, I like this story. I think it's pretty good. I made a few changes and I sent it out, and Raven Tree Press picked it up, and there it is. Now they're a bilingual publisher, so they publish the book in English only and then in English and Spanish.
Oh, very
So,
cool. Nice, nice.
yeah.
Wow. So how many children's books do we have?
But
How many?
I have 9 altogether.
9 you've written altogether.
Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
So what is your advice to future writers, children and kids who want to grow up to be writers? What's your advice?
Well, if they're really little, I say read a lot. And then when they're of writing age, write anything. You know, just keep reading and keep writing. And try to go to conferences and groups, because the whole thing is meeting people.
Right.
The only problem is the conferences are very expensive. But if you belong to a writers group, I belong to a writers group on Long Island, and from time to time they invite an editor in to speak and to read first pages. So you give them your best first page, and if the editor likes it, he or she will then read the whole manuscript, which is nice.
Excellent. So it's all about networking, naturally, right?
Networking, absolutely. Yeah.
Good, good. Okay. Now, is there one particular book that you enjoyed researching the most?
I also loved the Winter Marsalis book. That was great fun meeting him, and especially because he turned out to be such a nice person. And he even gave me his home phone number if I had more questions, which I thought was really special.
Excellent, yeah.
So.
Okay. Margie Malone's books are available on Amazon.com as well as Barnes & Noble, and she's got her own website, margaretgaymalone.com. Thank you for watching.